subsequently, we wrote that up for an article, which we've made available to you, which was published in a book by some Finnish colleagues. And they encouraged us to use an approach called normalization process theory. And we're not going to get too much into this theory, but it's one of many theories that's used to understand how technologies are used in the workplace. So not just applied to robots, but could be applied to cars, could be applied to different types of machinery, could be applied to a new drug regime, could be applied to computers in education. Any example of where people introduce new technology into a setting is accounted for by normalization process theory. So, John, you've got your head around this theoretical approach. Maybe you'd like to explain in very simple terms what some of the key things that NPT, as we call it, looks out for.
I will. Thank you so much for that, Perry. Yeah, so essentially, as you can see from the bullet points there, NPT was developed for us as social scientists to understand the social processes that shape new practices and technologies that come into our practice or our professional undertakings in the roles that we perform in everyday work. And it's about trying to imagine or try to evaluate how we might normalize these new technologies into our practice. It also facilitates the potential to focus on dynamic work that people do, individually or collectively, in their work practices, so as to implement and integrate a particular type of intervention. And the other big, I suppose, calling card for NPT is that it's already been widely used in the healthcare sector, because that sector, as you know, has been significantly impacted by all manner of new technologies over the last decade or so, not least of which will be AI and social robots. So it seemed like a really nice and very neat theory, and it's sociological in its origins as well. So social scientists, we were attracted to it. We like to theorize how things work or don't work to make sense of it.
I like this idea of normalization. I mean, if we think of even domestic technologies in our own houses, I'll give an example here from my own kitchen. We have two devices at home. One is one of those, they're both mixer blender type things. One is one of those wand mixer blender things. Some people watching this might be aware of these. It's two bits that you put together. You put it into a bowl, you press a button, and it mixes up whatever in the bowl, like a smoothie or something like that. And then we also have a food processor, which is this big square device that has about 16 different parts. You put a thing on top of the food processor, and you can add different sorts of blades and so on, and you can use it for grating carrots or mixing things and so on. In our house, the wand one is widely used on a very regular basis. The food processor comes out about twice a year. And why, even though it's a fantastic piece of technology, it hasn't fitted into the everyday work of the house. One, because one is easy to use. It's two parts you put together and you just use it. You take one part off, you put it in the sink, wash it, put it away. The other one has about 18 parts. You spend about 10 minutes putting it together, finding the right pieces, use it, and then spend about half an hour washing all the different bits that you've used and put it back into the drawer. So one, in a sense, has become normalized into the routines of the house. It fits in very nicely into the way that the kitchen would operate in a domestic environment. The other one just doesn't fit in. It's too much hassle. It's too much work, even though it's a fantastic piece of technology. Fantastic for a restaurant kitchen where maybe they're producing huge amounts of food, but for a domestic kitchen, it just doesn't really fit the bill. So it's not just the technology itself. They're both excellent pieces of technology and do exactly what they're supposed to do, but one fits in very well into the existing practices and the workflow in the kitchen. So it's normalized, if you like. The other one is not fitting into the routine. And what we're going to see, I think, is that when it comes to robots, similar things apply. If you ask those questions you asked earlier on there, is it pleasant to use? Is it good to use, or are there barriers to its use? So if you think of those kitchen technologies, it's good to use in some ways, but there are barriers to the use of those technologies. And this applies to many, many different technological innovations that do or do not get used across the world, including robots.
Okay, so the core constructs of NPT are as follows. The first issue is one around the idea of coherence. And this is where people within a setting attempt to make sense of a new practice or intervention. And of course, we're introducing new types of practice and new interventions other than social robots in health and social care settings all the while. And so NPT could very readily be used for understanding how, workforces engage in a coherent understanding of what the new types of work practices are.
And the technology, like what is this thing and what does it do? I mean, is it apparent or not apparent? So a furry seal-like thing comes into your workplace.
Yeah. How do you make sense of it?
How do I make sense of this? What's it for?
Yeah. The second component of NPT is this idea of cognitive participation. And in organizations and work settings, obviously you're dealing with numerous people, colleagues who've got different expertises, different backgrounds, etc. How do people within these diverse settings make sense of, how do they engage with the new technology, with a new robot like Paro, and how do we go about ensuring or encouraging them to commit to a new type of practice? I mean, this is quite radical to actually never have had the opportunity to work with a robot, a Paro, and then someone comes along and goes, you know what, we've got this new invention, this new robot that can dramatically improve, for instance, and this is open to debate, of course, in terms of research, the experiences of our clients with dementia. But it's also going to have a major impact on your professional performance and the duties that you perform now that you have this robot.
Okay, so even if in terms of coherence, okay, I know it's a robot. I know that we're used in a care setting. I know how it works, because the inventor has explained it all to me. But how do I engage with it? What do I actually do with it? I mean, do I pick it up and pass it around? Do I talk to it? Do I get other people to talk to it? And then how do I commit to that? How do I bring that into my practice? I mean, do I have to go on a training course? Do I have to practice for hours and hours, like if I was learning the piano or something? So you can imagine all those questions that people would ask when a new technology comes in to a workplace.
Absolutely. The third component is this idea of collective action. And this, as the term suggests, is where people are working together. And they may all have a different dimension of the work that they perform, but collectively they're providing a totalizing care of somebody, in this instance with dementia. And they've all got their own mutual and specific skill sets. But when you synthesize all of that, it forms a collective action. Yeah. So how can, if we introduce a new robot such as Paro into a setting, how can the people who are working collectively develop or understand the new totality of their collective practice and their collective action rather than their individual component contributions?
Yeah, it really points to the fact that the workplace is a community of people, isn't it? It's people working together, and they have to learn to work together with a new technology. Even people who work by themselves, even if you're a sole trader, you're still linked into communities, whether that's on the internet, looking at YouTube videos, working in user groups. We all work collectively in response to technology. It's very rare that we just completely have an individual response to it. So most workplaces have lots of people in them, and they have to learn how to work together with these new technologies.
That's right. And then the final core, if you will, construct of NPT is this very interesting idea of what's called reflexive monitoring. And this is something that probably we undertake as individuals automatically, unconsciously. How do we assess and evaluate our existing practice? Yeah. How do we manage to make sense of how we performed on a day-to-day basis? But it's about essentially evaluating also when we introduce new types of technologies or new processes into our work flows, if you will. So how can we make sense of, how does that robot that we've just been introduced to, how is that now helping me to make sense of my own professional identity and how I go about doing things and understand the world of care, for instance, before and after the intervention of a social robot?
And that can really range across a whole spectrum. Can't it? At one extreme, people can say, look, this thing's crap, I'm not using it, I don't like it, take it away, and that's the end of the story. And other people might say, okay, we're going to do a systematic evaluation. We're going to survey people and talk to people and have meetings and discussions and so on and so forth, and really spend a lot of time evaluating the use of a technology. You know, and different settings will respond in different ways. Some will literally just reject something straight away when it doesn't seem to do what they want to do. Other people will spend a lot of time and effort to see if the technology is useful over a period of time. So we'll see how that worked out in the setting that we're going to talk about.